Now, Shamima Begum, a British-born woman who left the UK as a teenager to become an Islamic State bride and who has justified killing infidels and stated she wasn't fazed when she saw severed heads. Well, the caliphate fell, and in 2019 she tried to return to the UK but was denied by authorities and then ultimately the Supreme Court. But she has re-emerged with another campaign to become British again. I'm now joined by Dr. Rakib, Ehsan, writer, commentator, and research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. Rakib, thank you for your time. Shamima Begum has recently appeared on television with an interview on Good Morning Britain, and she looked very different. She's wearing westernised clothing and posing with a Union Jack and is this a PR stunt? Is this another campaign to convince the British public that what she engaged in didn't really happen?
Well, I think that, Rita, it's a shameless PR campaign. We've seen in the interview that Shamima Begum has abandoned traditional Islamic dress and adopted more westernized forms of clothing. We've also seen images of positioning Union Jack pillows behind her. And I do feel that I call it for patriotism. I think ultimately it's a PR exercise in trying to soften the British public if she was to return.
And in the interview, she seemed to brush off her mistakes, making it sound like it's just normal teenage mistakes. But that wasn't what happened. She knew what Islamic State were. She knew about the Yazidis being enslaved and slaughtered. She knew about Islamic State's just atrocious human rights abuses, the mass rape and slaughter of infidels, and she chose to go there and be a part of it. So what's the British public's view on her? Is it softening? Could she possibly make her way back into the country? Has this interview changed minds at all?
Based on my reading of the mood, most people are in a very unforgiving frame of mind. And there's no surprise, Rita, because they've been exposed to statements that Shamima Begum has made in the past, where she's sought to justify the May 2017 Manchester Arena bombings, which killed 22 people, injured over 1,000 concert goers. The youngest victim in that terrorist attack, Rita, was 8 years of age. Safi Rose Roussos. And I do feel when we're looking at those age-related defences, we often hear people on the more progressive side of British politics say, oh, she was only 15 years of age when she travelled to Syria to join Islamic State. Rita, that's still comfortably above the age of criminal responsibility in England and Wales. That's just 10 years of age. And it's quite interesting because those same people, they'll also say that the voting age in Britain should be reduced to 16. They also argue that the likes of Greta Thunberg, we should be taking environmental advice from her. And I do think those efforts to strip Shamima Begum of all personal agency, we're ultimately talking about someone at 15 years of age who travelled thousands of miles to join a genocidal terrorist group. And as you discussed, a barbaric regime where the Yazidi people have been subjected to their genocidal activities, with Yazidi women locked in sexual slavery. And the Yazidi population has been, in effect, exiled from its ancestral lands in Upper Mesopotamia. So I think that when it comes to my sympathies, they lie far more with the Yazidi people as opposed to Shamima Begum herself.
Now, Rakib, you've written an article on progressive liberals and their tendency to describe Britain as inherently Islamophobic. But you say that British Muslims have a very different view of the country. Tell us about that.
So essentially, Rita, that piece which I authored for Mail Plus, it talked about this red-green alliance of radical leftists and political Islamists in the UK, an alliance which has grown in the post-9/11 era. But when you actually look at their depictions of Britain, effectively portraying British society as aggressively Islamophobic, that doesn't really match with the mainstream public attitudes of British Muslims. For example, more than 3 in 4 British Muslims believe that Britain is a good place to live as a Muslim. And one of the main reasons cited for that is freedom of religion. When you look at previous survey data, British Muslims are traditionally more satisfied with the way British democracy works when compared to the general population. And British Muslims, when compared to the general population, are more likely to think that the police engage as well with their local community. I'm personally of Bangladeshi origin. British Bangladeshis are notably more likely to have confidence in their local police force when compared to white British people, is 81% versus 74% when it comes to that indicator. So when you look at this survey data, it doesn't sound like a very downtrodden, disaffected and oppressed group to me. In reality, British Muslims, the vast majority belong to stable family units, strong local communities, which are largely appreciative of the religious freedoms and anti-discrimination protections which are offered to them under under the British democracy.
Look, I would imagine we'd probably have a similar situation here, and we've got similar sentiments being pushed by those on the left and some community leaders. Is that something that happens in the UK where perhaps the Muslim community is let down by those self-appointed leaders who can be quite divisive and can push these agendas which really don't reflect the feelings of the community?
Oh, absolutely, Rita. In Britain, we have the grievance industrial complex, which ultimately it's a wider social infrastructure which thrives on peddling these grievance-driven narratives, fundamentally warped interpretations of British society, which aren't rooted in reality, and they're not necessarily representative of minority populations living in the UK. So I would agree with you that British Muslims, they've really suffered in terms of these anti-British forces seeking to present themselves as representative of mainstream British Muslim attitudes. When in reality, when you look at British Muslim attitudes, the picture is far more positive than some would lead us to believe.
Yeah, and I think that's not just limited to the Muslim community. You could probably have all sorts of other ethnic and religious minority communities who feel the same way about being in the West. Dr. Rakib, thank you so much for your time this evening. We'll speak to you again soon.